Hello out there today. Welcome to our podcast. This is Coach Eric Johnson, the brand.
This is Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source. EJ, got a subject for you today. When do you start the D1 journey? And the reason why I wanted to talk about this was we've had some talks lately about the transfer portal and how that's really affected college recruiting and, you know, the timeline for athletes and those sorts of things. And, you know, we did a podcast on that, and actually we may have done two now on the transfer portal in junior college and a lot of different things in those aspects and where athletes kind of find themselves in that spectrum. And it was funny because I was listening to, I saw a short reel or clip from Deion Sanders.
Oh, okay.
And he was just reiterating what we were talking about, how, you know, if you're a college coach, you know, why would you grab a kid who's 18 years old when you can grab a kid who's 22 and have someone who can immediately produce, has shown a collegiate record, you know, has a collegiate resume, and can help you win now. And again, it's the same thing that we talked about. And so that got me thinking, and what kind of stuck out was that age gap, because he's right. Traditionally, most of the time, you were talking about an age gap of between 18-year-olds, you know, sometimes 17 if you graduate early, which was my case, and 20-year-olds. But you're no longer talking about 20-year-olds anymore. Now you're talking about 17, 18, and 22. So that's a 4-year gap. So that's like a freshman trying to come in and play varsity.
Right.
If you kind of equate it to the high school level. So, you know, I got to thinking, you know, now, and that's a huge difference in those age ranges. A 9th grader and a 12th grader, an 18-year-old and 22-year-old in just their physicality, probably, you know, their mental capacity, maybe how they approach the game, emotional state, all of those things, right? Because now you're talking a young man to, you know, again, essentially a young man, but a lot more mature young man.
Right, exactly.
And so, you know, usually we think of starting that hey, I want to be a D1 athlete clock at, you know, 9th grade. We say, okay, you know, 9th grade, got to kind of start to get serious. But now, where we've got a situation where we've got another 2-year gap, maybe we need to be starting and having that conversation with athletes earlier. So maybe your decision to be a D1 athlete has to not start at the 9th grade, but it has to start at the 7th grade so that you can be prepared. And, you know, I know this kind of folds into the whole, you know, now we're really getting young in the youth sports and, you know, kind of pushing, you know, athletes. But the reality is, where do you make up that gap in development? You know, can you make up a 4-year gap in 4 years of high school? Or do you need to start earlier? And what does that say for the multitude of kids that come through my door their junior year saying, oh yeah, I think I want to play D1 ball now?
Right.
See?
Yes.
So, you know, we're always talking about preparation and management. And so that's just kind of where, you know, my mind went is, hey, how do we,
something else I can't help?
How do we, you know, how do we get athletes ready to be D1 athletes if we don't start them earlier? And now this is separate from getting to the whole, you know, getting on that whole recruitment train thing and I got to be seen and all the rest of that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how do we build the physical and technical tool sets to put them on track to be ready in D1. And I think we have to really seriously consider starting that clock, not at the 9th grade now, but at the 7th grade, to increase the probability that they can be that athlete, that D1 athlete, by the time they're a junior or senior.
Yeah, man, that's a heavy subject. It's definitely worthy of a conversation, Aaron. And you and I are seeing this, have been seeing this the past 4 years, and slowly is become this. Aaron, I feel at this time, athletes need to start earlier in their athleticism, their tool set. And this can go back to a couple things. One, there's no physical fitness in school anymore. And there used to be a period where there was physical activity for these athletes. Presidential physical fitness.
Right.
You and I talk about this a lot. That's gone now. So where are their kids getting that natural set of using their body weight and using their body? Kids don't know how to do that.
Right.
And they think by playing one sport year round or just playing is good enough, just training that. Right. You and I know that in any sport, you need to use your whole body. And you need to understand how that body moves. You are seeing athletes coming through the door or playing in our company that are not athletically prepared to play in college because their body's not ready. Either they come in at 9th grade or 10th grade through your doors, or they come to our company and say, hey, get me ready. And it really takes, for me, I've always said this, it takes 6 years to train a hitter, just to train a hitter. Train. I say about like the physicality that they need to have.
Right.
The mindset. It takes 6 years to get all that together, and in that 7th year, they have a good feeling about what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So when we go back to what you said about this 17-year-old kid versus this 22-year-old man, there's a difference. That 22-year-old man had from 17 to 22 to acquire a lot of knowledge in college. And this 22-year-old player now is a sophomore.
Yeah.
but they're graduating, but they have, they have 2 years of the portal, right? They have 2 years of the portal. So now it's a redshirt sophomore.
Yeah.
And they're going to grad school. They got 2 years of grad school. They're going to graduate at 24 out of grad school, but they had 2 years of eligibility, right?
Right.
So that's what we're dealing with. You're going to see less freshmen getting an opportunity because of what Deion Sanders said, and what I've talked to probably 10 to 15 coaches that have told me that same thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to portal. Shoot, I've got a freshman who needs to develop. There's no more redshirting, Aaron. There's no more redshirting. Redshirting's gone. There's a 40-man roster, and they can go and change that roster every year through what I call the portal free agency.
Mm-hmm.
So athletes who are trying to come in and play collegiate sports as a freshman need to start earlier to gain that 5 or 6 years in order to compete with that 22-year-old person. So that means that training starts at 7th grade. It's simple as that. It starts there, it grows from there. And it's not like you come in and start lifting weights and you start doing this crazy. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that we're trying to prepare the body so when that body is maturing, it's ready to take on the next level of training, whether it's, sports performance, baseball, soccer, whatever, basketball. We need to prepare that body so it's ready to go. And we know that everybody's different. Everyone has a different timetable. If those athletes aren't being prepared early enough, then their timetable is really messed up. I've seen a lot of people walk through your doors recently, and in that last year, their sophomore or junior year and say, hey, get me ready. And I'm like going, no way. I mean, this no chance, you know? I mean, it takes years to acquire athleticism if you don't have it naturally. It takes a while to get that body trained the right way to move and understand how that works. Now, we're just talking about that. How about when you take that body and you're trying to get it to move correctly from a sports standpoint, like baseball or hitting or fielding, and the body can't do that because it's not ready to do that yet. Right. You got to start these athletes earlier. I agree with you 100% on that. And I'm telling all the listeners out there that really listen to us, just get your athletes prepared earlier that way. Simple as that with that. So this can go down many different avenues, and that's a good starter. Hey, that's a good first cup of coffee today right there, Aaron.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned it takes about 6 years to develop an athlete, because in track and field, we kind of adhere to that same sort of mentality where it takes 4 to 6 years. And it's not just an athlete who isn't athletic. It's right. Just an athlete who does have tools.
Right.
And you're talking about not just taking 4 to 6 years to get him or her ready, but that's just to get him or her ready to perform at a certain level. Doesn't mean that they've arrived after those 6 years.
Right. Right.
So that's just kind of setting the foundation, going through a lot of different, competitive iterations, and they build their IQ. They start to build the body better. You have the cumulative effect of training now instilled in the body, and the training becomes easier, but it becomes more specific, and it becomes a lot more higher quality, and that does take time. And you're right. I guess we need to start that sooner versus later. I mean, not to again go overboard. And again, I'm not talking about the recruiting aspect.
Right. We're not
talking about taking your 7th grader out to USC saying, hey, is this guy who you want?
Exactly right.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about laying the foundation for their athletic development, skill set and just physical development. I had another thought and it just went out of my head, but I think that's key now. And yeah, a 7th grader may not know if they want to play D1 ball, so there's it's kind of like, where do you meet this athlete? Because again, he's still, they're young, and at 6th or 7th grade, 8th grade, it's like asking them, what do you want to do for a living?
Exactly.
When you grow up, some may still want to be astronauts, and others might, want to still be firemen and all the rest of this, but they're not really grounded in, hey, the reality of what it takes and what they have to do and all this sort of thing. So it can be a challenge, excuse me, getting that 7th grader to make that commitment. But you can still put those things in place, even if it's kind of on a soft basis. Still start to get them to do some conditioning, still start to get them to do maybe a little bit of, extra skill-based training, fielding, hitting, shooting, whatever the case may be. But you kind of want to get that ball rolling, so that way you have some momentum once they decide, hey, yeah, okay, I'm on this, let's do this. And you haven't wasted a couple years, and he's not his sophomore year, and we're now trying to figure out how we do that. Now, with that said, maybe you also have a frank talk about what your expectations might be. Okay, you're not really interested in doing all the work it takes to be a D1, but you may still want to play in college, so let's look at your other alternatives. And so maybe you're going to be a D2 or a D3 athlete, or you might just play high school ball in sports, and then that be the end of it.
You know what, Aaron? It's funny you said that about a D1 athlete, and I'll disagree with you on that and say, hey, I've talked to all these coaches, D2, D3, they think the same way, man. Talking to these coaches, they think the same way. They're looking for these athletes to be prepared. It's like, just because you play D2 or D3 baseball, it doesn't get easier. There are so many competitive athletes out there, student athletes that want to go out and compete and play at that next level. They're not settling for chopped liver anymore at the D2, D3 level. They're not. It's so funny to watch the coach's mentality totally change because of a circumstance that, and we can go on another subject, the circumstance of the NCAA and the portal and what has happened in 3 years. That's just changed everybody's mindset, Aaron. And I was talking to probably 5 D2 coaches, and they told me, man, we're just, we're gathering, we're going to portal and grabbing those D1 bounce backs who don't want to play, who are having trouble playing at this school and this other school, and they decide to come here and be a superstar. I have one athlete that went to a WCC school, was a frontline guy, and went to that school, and they said, well, maybe you're not ready. COVID happens. He transfers and he becomes a superstar at D2. Maybe he wasn't ready at D1, but now he's an all-league performer, excelling D2. That's really where he's at. And the coach is like, that's what we want. We want that D1 guy that's, he could go there, but all of a sudden he gets there, he's not really ready. They think we'll take him and swap him up. And they grab them. And then it's the same thing at D3, where there's no, to be honest, there's no really, D3 regulations, D2 are just a little bit different. But even then, their mindset is, hey, listen, I want to go get that guy. This guy went to a D1 school. They didn't like him. He transferred to my school. He said, forget D2. I'm just going to go to D3 and be a star. And they're getting these kinds of players. So if you're thinking, people out there, that, hey, I'm just going to easily go to D2, D3, it doesn't work that way. It's just as competitive, if not even more. So, I kind of laugh at that a little bit. You got, regardless if it's D1, D2, D3, I feel you need to start your athlete a little bit earlier to understand that. And when you said about laying the foundation, start slow, that's excellent advice right there. Start slow, lay the foundation, find out where your athlete wants to be. Do they want to be a varsity athlete? Do they want to be a D1, D2, D3 athlete, NAIA athlete? I don't know, but find out and at least start something. That's the whole thing. Start something. Don't wait till the last minute.
Well, it sounds like there's no safe place to land. Basically, it's hot everywhere, and hey, that's just the nature of sports now. But looking at the landscape, we got to be a lot more realistic,
right?
Our kids, and having them make those decisions and understanding the ramifications of those decisions. Now, you can never say never. The kid can change their mind and turn things around, but I just find it's a lot harder. And this also kind of relates to one of the other things that you had mentioned, and it almost had skipped my mind. I'm glad we kept talking. Is you talked about the lack of physicality, athleticism, and a lot of these athletes, because there's no PE and all these, and they don't participate in these sorts of activities anymore. And you're right. And one of the biggest reasons athletes come to me, and I hear it all the time, between the ages of 11 and 15, is their lack of athleticism. They can't run, they can't jump, their balance, their coordination is off. And a lot of that, I used to attribute to growth spurts, and there's a proportion of athletes that happens to, but I'm really now taking a harder look at it, because I'm starting to get some younger athletes, because I'm understanding the importance of these kids doing these things, not hardcore, but because they're not doing them anywhere else.
Right.
And I'm seeing the effect of them not doing those things when they get to be 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And, you know, that's probably the biggest group of athletes that I have coming in. And again, it's not just because they are going through a growth spurt or that sort of thing, but it's because they never acquired the skill to begin with.
Right.
Because they never went out and played. They never did anything in the 4th grade, the 5th grade, the 6th grade. They didn't have PE. You know, they didn't really have a lot of recreational, diverse recreational activities. So that results in them, again, as we talked about before, always having this narrow skill set, even though I've been playing soccer since I was 4 years old. Well, that's a very narrow skill set. Doesn't make you an athlete. Okay, because I think the two things are different. I think there are, you know, there's your sport and then there's athletes, you know, and the two have to come together. But a lot of kids nowadays are just sport specific participants. I wouldn't even call them athletes. Okay,
I love that.
Yeah. So where's the and overall groundedness and broad spectrum or repertoire of movement that they need to be a better athlete? And that's coming crashing down on them at those ages of 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And so if you're not doing some basic things at the beginning of their athletic or sport development to go along with the sport specific stuff, you're still going to find yourself behind. And I think parents have the misconception, like I said, well, my kid's been playing baseball since he was, 5 years old, but that's not being an athlete.
It's funny, man.
Ties to that, I think.
Aaron, what you said brought back a lot of memories. And I remember in high school, and when you're in grade school, you play a lot of sports, man. When you're like in elementary and you play football with your buddies in the street, because that's what we did. And then you go to the field and play tackle football without the pads. And you get dirty, you get in the ground, you hit the ground, you see how it feels, how your body feels, all that stuff. That's part of your athleticism. And I remember, I played a lot of sports. And I remember my freshman year, I had a friend named Jamie Fowler, and he was a basketball player too. We both played basketball, played baseball. We would go out and play tennis every Friday. We'd go play tennis. And we played tennis for a couple of reasons. One, reaction, footwork, just overall quickness and getting the balls and stuff. It made us such great basketball players when we competed in basketball. And we did it, knowing that, hey, let's go do something different. Let's not, we shoot hoops and we go do the other stuff too, but let's try something different and see if we can coordinate and be better at this. And we used to do that every Friday in the fall. We would, we meet somewhere at a public tennis court, and I had my little wood racket. He had his wood racket, and we had a
going way back. I remember that now.
Yeah, and we would go out and play. We played 2 or 3 sets, a couple hours. It was part of just, what'd you do today? Well, we played tennis, worked out. That was a workout, but it helped us so much in different skill sets to get to the tennis ball and to swing at it and hit it solid and hand-eye coordination. I don't see any kids doing that anymore, man. I don't see kids, acquiring those skills because they're only so directed at this one thing of training and not using a multitude of sports to help them achieve athleticism.
Here's an old time memory. You could drive down my street back in the 70s, probably 72, on up. And you would drive down the street, and you always knew where there was a kid living at a house because you saw all the pot marks from the tennis balls on the garage door. Remember that? Because you're throwing the ball against the garage door and fielding. You either, like you said, hitting it with a tennis racket, doing something.
Right.
But the garage door was our backstop. And I remember our garage door always used to be pot-marked with the smudges of
any ball,
tennis balls, Nerf balls, whatever we had,
right.
wiffle balls. Oh man, that's funny. Anyway, that just brought an old time here. But yeah, we've got to change how we're doing things again, I think.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to. I think there needs to be a shift in thinking and now a shift in tactics if we want to, there's no guarantees. I'll hear me say it all the time, but raise the probability for our athletes to have success at the higher levels.
Well said, Aaron. Well said today. Again, way to bring it back to, when to start that journey for an athlete to excel at the next level. So, well, sports fans out there, hope you enjoyed our topic today, and please hit the like button on YouTube with us. We want to hear your feedback. But this is Coach Eric Johnson, the brand.
And I'll always remind you to hit the dislike button. It's Coach Aaron, the source. We'll take it all. We'll see you guys.